Picture a magnificent tropical corner that unexpectedly turns into a battlefield of a ruthless fight for existence. How will events unfold if trusting managers plan to interfere with the natural environment and transport carnivorous animals to eliminate dangerous snakes? Our story today is about the Japanese island of Amami-Oshima, where initially good intentions led to an ecological catastrophe. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Lots of interesting things await you. Incredibly beautiful green territories of Japan. Somewhere far to the south lies the strikingly beautiful island of Amami-Oshima. This is an absolutely unique place that is submerged in dense subtropical thickets and is constantly washed by warm oceanic waters. The evolution of local nature went on in absolute isolation over long millions of years. Exactly thanks to such a strong distance from the continent, an entirely special flora and fauna with amazing creatures found nowhere else could originate here. One of the very main treasures of this place is considered to be the relic Amami black rabbit. This incredibly cute, fluffy animal with short, dark ears lived exclusively on this given island, calmly feeding on juicy green leaves at night. Besides these wonderful rabbits, the local thickets were filled with quite rare birds, amazing singing frogs, and unusual tree rats. All these forest inhabitants for many centuries felt absolutely no fear of large carnivorous animals, because they simply never existed here. The beasts completely lost any skills of fleeing and camouflage. But this magnificent green region hid an incredibly deadly danger in its dense thickets. A genuine disaster for all local farmers was a colossal, venomous snake known by the name habu. This highly cunning and incredibly muscular reptile was capable of reaching 2.5 meters in length, causing panic just by its terrifying appearance. The habu snake was distinguished by a terrifyingly strong venom. This substance did not just deprive the bitten person of the ability to move, but literally destroyed the flesh and caused the strongest unbearable pain. In cases where a careless farmer accidentally stumbled upon a reptile while working, only a matter of minutes remained to make it to a hospital bed and receive help. This ruthless reptile hid perfectly among the dried leaves and dense thickets of sweet sugarcane. Thanks to the presence of special thermal receptors on its snout, it found a warm victim with absolute accuracy, even in a complete absence of light. The everyday life of ordinary Japanese peasants became increasingly similar to a walk through a dangerous minefield. In the early 1970s, the number of people on this island began to grow at an enormous pace. Local residents needed fresh, fertile plots in order to increase their abundant harvests. People began to ruthlessly cut down pristine ancient forests and lay spacious roads, actively clearing space to create new, huge plantations. Such a massive and sharp invasion of people into the usual territories of reptiles provoked a colossal increase in the number of dangerous encounters. The number of serious bites grew frighteningly fast with the onset of every subsequent agricultural season. Hospitals simply physically could not cope with the huge, continuous stream of wounded farmers. The situation became truly critical, which dealt a severe blow to the island economy. Farmers were so terrified by the huge number of snakes that they completely refused to go out to their own lands to work. The local leadership frantically tried to find an effective solution to this paralysing problem, because the usual methods of catching reptiles yielded absolutely no result. And so in 1979, a truly grandiose idea came into the bright head of one of the top managers. Local authorities remembered the existence of the famous small Asian mongoose. This small Indian animal was famous for its incredible reaction speed and ability to deal quite nimbly even with legendary cobras. In theory, such an idea looked like an ideal way out of the current situation. All need to regularly purchase expensive medicines and spend public funds would disappear if you could just bring a ready-made, natural snake-destroying machine to the island. Everyone was sure that the small, fluffy creatures would quickly clear the territory of the venomous threat and secure the work of the peasants. The approval of this historic plan took place at an amazing speed, and at the same time, no one bothered to consult with qualified biologists. In an endless race for instant success, officials did not even try to deeply study the habits of the imported beast. The state purchased exactly 30 individuals and released them into the territory of the wild tropical forest with stormy applause. The local press was full of bright, joyful articles proclaiming the imminent economic revival of the entire island. Ordinary peasants who finally received help from the leadership were truly happy. The island population breathed a sigh of relief in full confidence that the foreign, fluffy guests would ruthlessly deal with the hated, venomous reptiles in the shortest possible time. However, subsequent events went in a completely different direction, destroying all government expectations. Very soon, one critically important biological contradiction was discovered, because of which this whole ambitious project turned into an incredibly stupid catastrophe. It turned out that the Indian animals and the famous habu snakes live in completely mismatched biological schedules. The animals delivered from the Indian continent belonged to the category of classic daytime hunters. They preferred to wake up with the very first morning rays, actively running around the territory and devoting the entire daylight to the search for food. As soon as the sun began to hide behind the edge of the horizon, the exhausted mongooses comfortably curled up deep in their burrows and fell fast asleep. On the other hand, the dangerous habu snake was the absolute queen of the dead of night. Throughout the whole hot day, this venomous reptile slept carelessly in some cool crevice between the rocks. She was absolutely unreachable for the daytime predator, exactly at the time when he actively searched the surface looking for food. The reptiles crawled out for their usual relentless hunt, only after the island plunged into complete darkness. As a result, it turned out that the intended saviors and the pests themselves lived as if in two different realities, absolutely not crossing paths with each other among the forest thickets. They simply had not a single chance to clash in natural conditions. Besides this most serious miscalculation, the smart mongooses instantly learned another crucial rule of life on this land. They found themselves in an incredibly prosperous place, where there was absolutely no requirement to penetrate into deep dark holes and risk their own skin in deadly fights with snakes. The smart animals simply looked around and chose a much easier path. The local forests were teeming with incredibly appetizing and totally defenseless prey. Local animals and birds, which lived for thousands of years without the threat from large land hunters, completely forgot about how they needed to escape by fleeing or hide. They turned into a phenomenally accessible target for the incredibly fast, agile, and amazingly smart Indian predators. The first and most devastating blow fell on the universally adored black rabbits. These funny, plush, fat ones walked quite slowly, they lacked strong protective teeth, and they completely did not realise the serious danger hanging over them. For the constantly hungry mongoose, such a naive relic animal turned out to be simply a magnificent and filling lunch. Having dealt with the rabbits, the agile daytime hunters took up the mass extermination of unique island birds. The problem was that careless birds for centuries quietly built their nests right on the regular ground among the foliage, not worrying at all about land inhabitants. The birds were accustomed to fearing only threats from the air, therefore they completely ignored the protection of their eggs on the ground. The nimble mongooses ate bird clutches and very young, fragile chicks with a colossal appetite. The hunting instinct of the newly minted rulers of the forest simply had no boundaries at all. They joyfully ate strange tree rats, rarest frogs, and large local insects, confidently feeling themselves to be the rightful owners of this entire piece of land. In such incredibly favourable conditions, where food lay literally under their feet and natural enemies completely did not exist, the foreign animals began to reproduce just at an incredible speed. Females gave birth to strong cubs several times during one single year. Nature seemed to have gone crazy itself, actively encouraging this bold seizure of territory. Growing toothy babies matured in a matter of weeks and immediately joined the process of devastating the natural wealth. The growth rate of the population of these cunning animals could be compared only to a rapidly spreading steppe fire. From the original 30 cute individuals, the army of invaders grew to absolutely unimaginable cosmic scales. By the early 2000s, about 10,000 fluffy pests were running wild on this modest piece of land. The time came to save the Japanese farmers themselves, since their domestic chicken coops and generous fruitlands turned into a favourite target for this constantly growing horde of cheeky, gluttonous immigrants. The island ecosystem began to shake from the colossal pressure from this merciless foreign invasion. With every subsequent scorching day, the dense thickets irretrievably lost their valuable biological treasures, undergoing massive extermination and looting. The juicy green clearings grew empty, and the once ringing singing of outlandish frogs sounded quieter every year. However, the most monstrous and comical moment in this massive story turned out to be that the original deadly problem had not moved a single inch. The multiplied habu snakes continued to actively crawl around the farming lands at night, as if nothing had happened, and extremely painfully bit the working people. Their giant population completely did not suffer from the mongoose venture. The regional Japanese government faced the fact of a double deadly disaster. Not only did the local peasants continue to fall onto hospital beds from frequent bites, but a grandiose threat of the total disappearance of the unique natural heritage was added to this. This wonderful and incredibly cheap idea actually turned into a grandiose national disgrace. Attentive scientists raised a colossal alarm when they took up a fresh count of the surviving local animals. The received data threw qualified experts into the deepest shock. It turned out that the number of unique black rabbits dropped to a paltry 2,000 frightened to death individuals. The danger of permanently losing this whole ancient species became catastrophically close. It became completely obvious that it was required to immediately break this rapid machine of ecological extermination. The Japanese authorities, feeling the full depth of shame for their hasty historical blunder, made the only correct and tough decision to completely clear the island. The officials were obliged to save the environment, not reckoning with the upcoming fabulous expenses. Billions of Japanese yen were directed to the organisation of an unprecedented giant war with the mongooses. A special professional team was urgently assembled in the main city, before which was set the super task of catching every imported animal down to the very last individual. It is precisely how an incredibly massive operation to protect fragile nature from stupid human presumption started. To eliminate the nimble pests, a special squad was created, which received the unspoken name of the Mongoose Control Group. Brave trackers and resilient ecologists took an incredibly difficult task on their shoulders. These people spent days on end in the deep, impenetrable thickets, tracking down every cunning, fluffy target. Professional hunters thought out a detailed strategy and quite cautiously placed around 30,000 complex mechanical devices along all the mountain trails. These metal traps were designed in a special way so as under no circumstances to harm the rare local animals accidentally trapped in them. Each structure was checked by people daily with flawless precision. However, the Indian creatures again demonstrated their incredible mental abilities. These nimble animals surprisingly quickly learnt to bypass the set traps, unerringly sensing the smell of alien metal and fresh human tracks. During the first extremely hard months, the catching results were simply insignificant against the background of the entire frightening size of the colony. Realizing all the cunning of their enemy, the specialists promptly changed their approach to the matter. Dozens of excellently trained dogs were involved in this exhausting round-the-clock work in the forests. The most skilled canine units of the country engaged in the process with maximum dedication. The incredible sense of smell of the tailed helpers allowed easily finding mongooses even under huge, heavy boulders. The magnificent work of the dog sleds provided a colossal turning point in the course of this endless struggle to preserve nature. The trained dogs not only skillfully picked up the trail of the elusive predators, but also very fearlessly drove them into confined spaces, giving the hunters the opportunity to do their job as promptly as possible and without noise. Very slowly, literally centimetre by centimetre, the huge area of the island began to gradually be freed from the dominance of alien guests through exhausting human sweat. This protracted process required truly iron endurance from all the participants in the operation. The intellectually developed animals clung with all their might to their new, prosperous place of residence. In the most remote and hard-to-reach sections of the tropical forest, technical specialists placed ultra-modern infrared sensors and tracking cameras. These automated systems flawlessly registered the slightest movement of animals, transmitting all the information straight to the monitors of the operational brigades. It was the high-introduced technologies that served as the main weapon in the hands of the rescuers. The great confrontation with foreign predators stretched over many years of truly exhausting physical labour and entailed simply incredible financial expenses from the state wallet. The capture of each individual Indian pest cost the country an astronomical sum of money. A mistake made in the previous century turned into a huge black hole for the budget. Billion-dollar amounts were written off weekly to issue salaries to a whole battalion of professional catchers. The purchase of expensive computer equipment and regular maintenance of the performance of thousands of metal devices. The most paradoxical thing was that all these huge funds were invested not into the development of the island, but merely in an attempt to correct a past catastrophic stupidity. To the indescribable delight of biologists, these titanic labours stretched over 40 years ultimately led to success. The number of relic Amami black rabbits began to gradually, but extremely confidently grow. The miraculously surviving amazing birds boldly spread their feathers again, delighting the emerald subtropical expanses with their luxurious, loud vocals. This island was officially proclaimed completely free from the imported fluffy aggressors only after 40 years of continuous, ruthless struggle. That very day turned into a national holiday and caused a storm of delight in the global scientific community of environmental defenders. Hiding behind the bright slogans of victorious news, there was an incredibly sad and truly philosophical paradox of all the performed work. When the passions from this huge ecological war subsided a little, ordinary people shuddered to realize just how powerless they are in the face of mighty and independent nature. Those same dangerous habu snakes, for the destruction of which all this incredibly expensive and destructive state program was once launched, did not disappear anywhere. Their numbers completely did not react to the presence of alien heat-loving hunters. The venomous reptiles continued to live their lives, remaining the main lords of the night jungles. After many years of the most brutal struggle, the exhausted Japanese farmers returned once again exactly to the very same point from which everything started. The terrifying crawling problem still quietly moved around the working farmers, as if completely not noticing all those colossal historical upheavals clearly through which the island passed. The ancient, cold-blooded creatures reacted completely indifferently to all the great plans of the capital officials. No cheap magic trick with getting rid of the danger happened. The grandiose administrative power of Japan worked for decades only on eliminating its own mistakes, nearly destroying the local unique beauty in the process. The surrounding biological world quite harshly punished excessively self-confident people, clearly showing that it will not tolerate any bold managerial experiments. In the end, frightened local workers had no choice but to simply return to the basic means of banal protection against venomous bites proven over the years. As it turned out, during simple, everyday practice, thick, tall boots protect against snake venom many thousands of times more reliably than entire battalions of fluffy Indian rescuers. Farmers simply began much more often to take a scythe in their hands and carefully cut off high excess grass around the entire perimeter of their working sugar territories. Around residential wooden buildings, people began to massively erect mighty concrete fences with an absolutely smooth surface. Thanks to such a slippery wall, a huge heavy reptile is simply physically incapable of crawling up and penetrating the territory of the yard. Ordinary everyday safety rules turned out to be the only right and working method. Precisely because of such strict and responsible prevention, the number of deadly dangerous sudden incidents with snakes confidently fell to the smallest historical value. Japanese farmers finally received the opportunity to work quite safely and stably on their own plots of land, entirely without interfering with the lives of forest inhabitants in this process. That colossal amount of financial funds that was vainly blown on the war with mongooses could easily have secured 100 years of prosperous life for farmers. These billions would have been enough to absolutely give every resident, for absolutely free, the very best and incredibly durable protective clothing in the world, as well as to build the most advanced fences. However, a banal desire to find the easiest path led state politicians to one of the most massive ecological mistakes in the world. The incident on this unique island is written in golden letters into world textbooks as a vivid example of human short-sightedness and incredible managerial presumption. Nowadays, on this surprisingly beautiful resort, an extremely strict state biological customs functions round the clock. Inspectors and ecologists investigate all arriving ships with incredible meticulousness in order to tightly exclude even a tiny chance of the appearance here of any foreign seeds or unnoticed harmful insects. Ordinary townspeople and rural residents felt incredibly deeply and painfully what exact price society has to pay for a single, ill-considered signature on paper. Today, in every school, young Japanese students listen very carefully to long lectures where this instructive and terrible historical failure of their grandfathers is analysed in detail. Any unknown biological species that is artificially brought into an environment isolated from the world always works like a time bomb of incredibly delayed but terrible action. Wild, centuries-old evolution absolutely never forgives a person for bold, ambitious attempts to forcefully redraw its old, fragile rules. Nature has always been, and will forever remain, thousands of times smarter and more multifaceted than any bold calculations created in comfortable, bureaucratic offices. All elements in this world are interconnected by millions of absolutely invisible but extremely strong threads of biological balance. Humanity has never been an almighty god on this round blue planet. Making a final conclusion from all this lengthy historical summary, one wants to focus attention on the most important thought. An attempt to outsmart the millennial laws of life turned into a global tragedy and cost the state billions, just to return the system to the start. This painful experience is called to serve as the main warning for subsequent generations. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and share in the comments what alternative ways of solving this snake problem you can offer.